much is an hour of your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the ability to focus your time on what you do best, not on tedious mailing and shipping tasks. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. More than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Go to Stamps.com/audio for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.
This is Monsters is a true crime podcast and YouTube channel where I tell the stories of the worst people on the planet. Though the stories of the victims are told, we focus on the monster who carried out the evil act. The show is split into seasons, and each season has a theme. In Season 1, we covered cases of filicide, which is the act of a parent killing their own child. In Season 2, we covered cases of people killing for love. We recently finished up Season 3, where we covered cases of parricide, which is the act of someone killing their parents. Tune in now as we start Season 4, where we dive into the minds of family annihilators, sick individuals who decided to destroy their entire families. Check us out anywhere that you listen to podcasts or on YouTube by searching This is Monsters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 272 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah?
We're busy.
We are busy.
By the time this episode comes out, I will be home from my daughter's national dance competition. But to go to that, because it's pretty much a week-long thing, you and I are recording a lot of episodes early.
We're trying.
We will succeed.
We will.
Because
we don't have a choice.
We're recording it right now, and it will come out.
We're doing it.
In the future. Hey, let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout-outs. We had Cheesy Poof.
What's going on, Cheesy?
Don't mess with my Cheesy Poofs. Catherine Gonzalez.
Hey, Catherine.
Corey33Y.
What's up, Corey?
Brittany Watkins.
Hey, Brittany.
Suzanne.
Appreciate that, Suzanne.
Tim McKinney.
Hey, Tim.
Elizabeth Gibson.
What's up, Elizabeth?
Matthew Keller.
Hey, Matthew.
JJ Scott.
Hey, what's going on, JJ?
Kenny Anderson.
Hey, appreciate that. Kenny Anderson, like the Bengals' old quarterback.
Oh.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah. There was also a really good basketball player.
Really?
Named Kenny Anderson.
So it could be a super athlete.
Could be. We don't know. Michelle Chung.
What's going on, Chung?
Nicole Wren.
Hey, Wren.
Robert Martin.
What's happening, Robert?
Jody Thompson.
Hey, Jody.
Wendy Britt.
Appreciate that, Wendy.
Shelley Pfeiffer.
There's Shelley.
Abby Walker.
Hey, Abby.
Taylor Villanueva.
Ooh, Villanueva.
Linda.
Hey, Linda.
Kimberly Benson.
Hey, appreciate that, Kimberly.
Clarissa Hitchcock.
Ooh, related to that. Alfred.
Alfred?
Or Alfred.
And last but not least, Taylor Piper.
What's going on, Taylor?
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Leanne Walls.
Hey, Leanne.
So appreciate all that support. And then we had great PayPal donations from Bronte Ellard.
Bronte.
And Andrea Skinner.
Hey, Andrea. I was pretty excited about that, saying that. Bronte.
Bronte. You just like to say that word.
I did.
So thanks to everyone. We appreciate it. Hey, Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on the Chowchilla kidnapping. You know, fascinating case from 1976. Yeah. We're headed to California. You know, what's strange about this for us, you know, as it pertains to a TCAT case, is nobody dies.
Yeah.
There's no murders. What there is an abduction of an entire school bus full of children.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it progresses from there. But it's a very well-known case. It was actually voted by the AP as the #1 news story in California in 1976.
Wow.
topping like Patty Hearst and, Ronald Reagan running for president and all that stuff.
And it also has a very hip song.
It does.
Yeah.
That they wrote about the bus driver, who's kind of the hero of the story.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We are talking about the Miyazawa family slaying. So we're headed to Tokyo, and it was on the last day of December 2000 that a family of 4 was murdered in Tokyo's Setagaya district, including 2 young children. This case has never been solved, despite the killer leaving ample physical and biological evidence at the scene. It remains one of Japan's longest running and most mysterious unsolved crimes. Tokyo, Japan's capital city, is comprised of 23 wards, each of which is a self-governing municipality with several districts. The Setagaya ward is located on Tokyo's western side. It's a family-friendly residential area with easy access to the city and shops, and this is where the Miyazawa family lived. They lived in a 3-story home with their immediate family living right next door. Their home was adjacent to Setagaya Park, which offered numerous recreational activities, boating, playgrounds, tennis courts, hiking trails. They even had cherry blossoms that would bloom in season.
Sounds like a fun place to live.
It sounds like a great place.
Has a lot of activities to do.
While 400 similar homes were originally built, only 4 homes remained inside the park by 2000. The rest had been purchased by the ward and torn down to expand the park. And the Miyazawa's home was one of the 4. And basically, the park surrounded their home on the east and the south sides, and then the river was to the west. The skate park and playground were directly behind and separated only by a fence. When the skate park was added, it introduced a rowdy crowd, right? You're going to have skaters, teenagers. There's going to be a lot of noise in what obviously must have been before that a pretty peaceful setting.
Yeah. So I guess go from one extreme to maybe another.
Well, when you buy into or when you buy the home, I'm picturing it as kind of a neighborhood,
right?
400 homes
At one point, yeah.
At one point, and then you have this great recreational area. And then over time, the homes start to be bought up, they're torn down until what you're left with is 4 homes essentially surrounded by this now even bigger park.
It's like your own oasis.
It is, but then, you've also got some things that maybe you don't like.
Right. Maybe
you don't want to live right next to a skate park where, all day long and into later at night, kids are hooting, screaming, and doing all that stuff.
You'd be out there with your Vans on, doing some type of skateboard wheelies or
a 360 something. I don't even know skate terms, man. I've never skated in my life. My assumption is that if I even tried to ride a skateboard,
you're going to the ER.
Something's breaking.
Yeah.
Now, over the previous few years, there had been sightings of suspicious persons, which caused the Miyazawas to have safety concerns. Due to these concerns, when the municipality offered to buy the 4 remaining houses to expand the park further, they decided that it was time to sell. Let's get out. Let's move to a safer area. They applied to be relocated, but found it difficult to locate a school for their son who had special needs.
Well, it never fails when you have these big parks that you will get some suspicious looking people wandering through. It's just going to happen.
I'll tell you right now, I don't care how nice a park is. If there are some secluded areas or, some places at night, there's probably some shady stuff that's going to go down.
Sure.
Hence, maybe some suspicious people doing that shady stuff. I know you leave here every night that we tape and you say, well, I'm going to the park. And I say, why?
Headed to the park.
And you say, that's my business, man. Stay out
right.
of my business. I don't ask questions.
What I do at the park is what I do at the park.
So the Miyazawa family was comprised of the parents, Father Mikio and Mother Yasuko, and their young children. They had a daughter, Nina, and a son named Rei. Mikio and Yasuko met at a seminar in the 1980s and married in December 1986. According to unresolved.me, Mikio was 42 years old. He was a creative man who had a love for animation. He spent his childhood participating in all types of theater and puppetry productions. After graduating from college, he was employed as an animator and a question researcher for television quiz shows. I think I would like to do that.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'm really good at trivia.
Yeah.
I think I would enjoy that. He was eventually employed with Interbrand, a marketing firm with over 20 offices worldwide. Mikio worked in Interbrand's Tokyo branch, developing corporate identity for major corporations. His coworkers described him as a good-natured and friendly man who was well-liked by everyone. So much different than our episode last week.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a departure.
It was.
This is what we're used to hearing. When we start to talk about victims, this person was great coworker, great neighbor, well liked by everyone, would give you the shirt off their back.
Right.
It's not what we had last week.
It was not.
Yasuko was 41 years old. She was described as a kind, intelligent, compassionate woman who ran what was called a cram school out of their home. Cram schools are private tutoring centers to help individual students prepare for the exams that they encounter throughout their education.
Man, I could use some cram schools back in the day.
You could. Now you crammed, but that was that means something much different over here.
Oh yeah.
That meant if you had a test in second period, you were cramming in first period because you hadn't studied at any point in time prior to that.
Very true.
But I do think, Gibbs, one of the things that it really highlights is just how much emphasis they place on education in the Japanese culture. Really education and family. They place great importance on those two things.
Yeah.
But it was said that Yasuko didn't let her business interfere with being a mother. Friends described her as being devoted to her children. The couple's son, 6-year-old Rei, had learning disabilities. He also had a speech impediment that needed special attention. My daughter is actually set to earn her bachelor's in speech therapy.
Really?
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, I'm very proud of her. She's going to go on and get a graduate degree to go with it.
Maybe she can work with me a little bit.
Maybe. We might see how it works. Now, while Rei attended a public school for kindergarten, his parents wanted him to receive professional help before he attended elementary school. It was said that they wanted him to have the best possible start in life.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want your kid to have the best life that you could provide?
I think most parents want that. Now, I do think in a lot of situations, it comes down to what people can afford. Right? When you start talking about specialized schools and, tutoring, some of that stuff can get very, very expensive, and not everyone has the money to do those type of things outside of the public school system. Their 8-year-old daughter, Nina, was a bright girl who excelled academically. She even skipped a grade, which I know is something you're extremely familiar with.
Oh, for sure.
You did that on, a number of different occasions. You had a real young Sheldon thing going there for a while.
I did. Quick advancement is what I had.
Yeah. She had a lot of passions. She was active in soccer, piano, and ballet. And it was said that she was also, Nina was, very protective of her younger brother.
I think a lot of older sisters can be like that.
And the other way around. I think older brothers can be protective of their younger sisters as well. And maybe, it had something to do with the fact that he had some learning issues. He had special needs. Was she going to be even more protective of him because of that. Both parents doted on their children. They kept a record of their physical growth on the living room wall over the years. I know a lot of people do that.
Oh, yeah. I know we did that with our kids at one point, too, on the laundry room wall.
Yeah, we never did it on a wall. A lot of times I see people do it like on the door frame.
Yeah.
A little less obtrusive, maybe, it doesn't come right out and, jump in your face. But I always liked it. I just thought, time passes so quickly. It was kind of fun to look back and see, kind of a marking of a period of time.
I know you always enjoyed measuring things.
I enjoy measuring things very much. Measure twice, cut once. So there was a lot said, about the parents spending a lot of time with the kids. They spent evenings with them and with their extended family next door rather than going out on the town.
I mean, they had the money. They could go out, but they really enjoyed hanging out with their family.
They did.
Some people don't like that. Some people don't want to spend time with their extended family.
Well, some people's families maybe are not worth spending time. I don't know. Maybe I'm not saying that about my family. Obviously, I enjoy spending time.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time with your extended family.
I do think there are some people who, they might not like their family as much as the next person, and especially extended family. By late 2000, the Miyazawa family had located a suitable plot of land on which they were going to build their new home. They planned to have Yasuko's mother, sister, and her husband join them as neighbors as soon as their home was completed. I mean, they already lived currently right next door to the Miyazawas, and it seemed as though from the research, Gibbs, that everyone on both sides was eager to stick together.
Yeah, I think they were really happy hanging out.
They planned to move out in March of 2001. So this is early 2001. They really, I think, were kind of getting fed up with the teens hanging out at the skate park. So they had just a couple of more months and they would get out from under that. According to Medium.com, the Miyazawa house had 3 levels. The ground floor featured a room in the entryway that Mikio used as a home office, while the second floor held a mezzanine that served as the children's bedroom and in which Nina and Ray shared bunk beds. And then the third floor contained an attic that featured Yasuko's and Mikio's bedroom. Now, here in the States, that's not something I advise. I don't advise putting your primary bedroom on the third floor.
It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot pretty much most places in the U.S., even here in the summertime.
Yeah.
Our bedroom's on the second floor. Man, it just gets so hot up there. At certain times, there's nothing we can do. The air conditioning just cannot handle it.
Plus, you had to go up a ladder,
That's true.
Not fun.
To the loft.
Right.
According to TokyoReporter.com, on the morning of Sunday, December 31st, 2000, Yasuko's mother, Maruko, tried to call her on the phone, as she did every day, but no one answered. She also realized that she hadn't seen anyone in the household, so she went around, knocked on the door, but didn't get a response. She went home to retrieve her spare key to check on her daughter and her family. Maruko continued up to the second floor mezzanine level, and that's where she found the bodies of her daughter, Yasuko, and her granddaughter, Nina. They were both dead. Obviously, the police were called. They came out. They investigated. They pieced together what they thought happened based on evidence left at the crime scene. What they believe is that at around 11:30 p.m. on December 30th, the killer scaled the fence at the rear of the house, then scaled the house on the outside to reach the second floor, where the intruder entered through the screen in the bathroom window while the children were sleeping nearby. They believe that the killer began in the children's bedroom on the second floor, strangling Ray while he slept, before turning to Nina, who they believe put up a fight and tried to get away. She ran to the ladder, leading to the attic to alert her mother.
I think Nina had to be pretty scared.
Yeah, obviously she had to have been. Now, what we don't know was whether, she saw her brother being killed or, only woke up when she was attacked, but maybe got an idea that he was already dead when she fled for her life. On a recent episode, Gibbs, we talked about, kind of the safety that some people have living, let's say on a third floor apartment.
Right.
Okay. You feel safe. Well, we talked about, somebody who scaled balconies and was able to get up to that third floor. Here's a situation where you've got somebody who's able to scale a house.
Yeah.
And, I don't think a lot of people really think about an intruder coming in through a second or third story window.
But it can happen.
But it can happen. And it's what they believe happened here. A first aid kit was found open in the attic, and police believe Yasuko tried to tend to Nina's wounds. They then believe that the pair went to the mezzanine level, perhaps at that point believing that the intruder was gone. According to Unresolved Mysteries, during this time, Mikio rushed up the first floor stairs after he heard the disturbance and ran into the intruder. And he fought with this person and actually injured the killer, but was stabbed in the head with a sashimi knife. A police report claimed that part of the sashimi knife's blade broke off inside Mikio's head, and the killer then attacked Yasuko and Nina with the broken knife until using a santoku knife from the house to murder them. So we got a couple of different knives involved here. I think I understand what both of these are. I know for a fact I have a santoku knife.
Oh, do you?
Yes. If it's the one I'm thinking about, it looks like a big butcher's knife, but it has these little scallops on the bottom that are supposed to make it easy for whatever you're cutting to kind of slide off.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
I believe that's what that is.
Yeah.
Now, sashimi is raw fish. It's what a lot of people call sushi, but sushi's not actually raw fish, but sashimi is. So my thought is sashimi knives are probably really, really sharp.
I would think so.
To cut through some of that, raw fish, you want to get those really precise cuts, but I don't know how big they are.
It sounded like, too, that it might be a little bit thinner blade, and sometimes the sharper blades are thinner.
Yes.
And maybe that's why it snapped off, broke off in his head.
Yeah, you could be absolutely right. If you think of like a fillet knife for a fish.
Right.
Very, very sharp, but very thin.
Yeah.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to Gibby and I talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. Cerebral is an online mental health service that offers prescription medication, counseling, and therapy for anxiety, depression, ADHD, insomnia, and more. And Cerebral is one of the few services that provides prescription medication online through a licensed provider and ships that medication straight to your door so that you can skip the pharmacy lines. Cerebral has an amazing mobile app, which makes it like having your own personal care team wherever you are. You can message your care team and access self-care resources wherever you go. Connect with your counselor and therapist on your own schedule through your laptop or through the Cerebral mobile app. This makes it quicker to get an appointment. It also makes it easier because you can pick your favorite spot in your home to have your session. They have affordable treatments, which are about 1/3 the price of traditional therapy. And for listeners of this program, you can receive 65% off your first month of medication management and care counseling at Cerebral.com/unsolved. Go to Cerebral.com/unsolved for 65% off your first month. That's just a total of $30 to get started. Join Cerebral today on their mission to make quality mental health care accessible and affordable for all.
Work takes up most of your time. That's why you should use Stamps.com to save time with your mailing and shipping. Stamps.com will simplify your postage needs and add valuable time back into your workday, so you have flexibility to focus on more important things. Stamps.com can handle your mailing and shipping needs with rates up to 88% off UPS and USPS. Send invoices, checks, certified mail, packages, and anything else you need to keep your business running with Stamps.com. If you sell online, connecting with every major marketplace and shopping cart is easy. Plus, you can schedule package pickups through their dashboard and automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers with Stamps.com's Rate Advisor. Add more flexibility to your workday with Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com/program to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/program.
Stolen from the home was a school tuition fee, which had recently been paid by one of Yasuko's students of 200,000 yen, or about 2,000 US dollars. Yasuko's and Mikio's wallets had been emptied, and based on the paperwork left out, it appeared as though the killer was trying to work out the passcode to Mikio's bank cards. So we have murder. I think based on what we've talked about so far, it does seem as though robbery may have been the motive. And that was backed up by an article on JapanToday.com that said, based on all of the evidence, investigators believe the murders were motivated by robbery. However, some cash, checks, electronics, and jewelry were left behind. And I do think that's something that you always have to take a look at. I don't know that it always means the same thing in every instance. But a lot of times we'll talk about, jewelry that's kind of out in the open in plain sight.
Right.
Why wouldn't somebody just grab that?
It's right there. Why wouldn't you take it?
They've already committed multiple murders. They've stolen some cash. Was it a matter of, time? Did they not want to spend too much time in the house? Or was there something else going on? Because we've seen in many episodes, it ultimately turns out that it really wasn't all about robbery. Sometimes things are taken to make it appear as though this was a robbery gone wrong. So, we talked about some of this paperwork that was left out. It was reported that it was written in kanji, one of the 3 Japanese written languages, comprised of more than 2,000 separate characters. Okay, that's a lot.
It is. It's not a easy language to master, but
yeah, I know you did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggle with, our limited alphabet here.
Sure. But when I was studying the samurai,
that's when you really got into it.
I did.
It was said that it's the most complex of the 3, but the intruder was definitely able to read the language. And as kanji is taught to Japanese public school children, it's believed that the killer was a native Japanese citizen who attended school there. And that's interesting, right? A lot of the cases in the US, we're not so much talking about those types of paths in an investigation.
No.
So I did find that, kind of a fascinating tidbit that they were able to kind of narrow it down that way.
Yeah, knowing how difficult the language is, you can say, well, who would know or, use that language? And, it helps them kind of pinpoint
who this killer may be.
Yeah.
A Raglan-style sweatshirt was found on the second floor. And since it didn't have any cuts or slash marks, police believe that it was the killer who left it behind. A gray hat, a black jacket, a green checkered scarf, a gray and black hip bag, a pair of black gloves, and 2 black handkerchiefs were also left behind at the scene and also are believed to have belonged to the killer. You know, I'm not a big fan of the hip bag or the fanny pack, but if you're a cat burglar,
Yeah.
I could see where maybe, you know, a pouch like that would come in handy.
They're very practical.
I don't wear them
Yet.
and will never.
Yet.
Multiple footprints were also found near the children's bunk beds, on the stairs, and outside the bathroom window. Those on the staircase switched position halfway up from the wall side to the handrail side, which to police indicated that the intruder had been in the military. A closer inspection of the footprints left outside the bathroom window revealed the killer had used that window to exit the house, not enter it as police initially theorized.
And so we're starting to build up certain characteristics of this suspect.
Yeah, and to me, this is always one of the most fascinating parts of the case, the investigation, right? What are the clues? What, kind of pinpoints whether a killer was left-handed, right-handed? Okay, they figured out he walked in a certain pattern, which they thought maybe meant he was in the military. All of that stuff is fascinating. Now, a large amount of blood not belonging to any of the Miyazawa family was found in the attic and throughout the rest of the house. It was found on towels, bandages, even on sanitary napkins. So police believe that the killer cut himself during his frenzied attack and then tried to dress his wounds to halt the flow of blood before leaving the scene. And that makes a lot of sense. If you're using, some of these very sharp knives,
Sure,
and you're attacking, what are the chances that you're going to cut yourself? I think in a lot of instances, the chances are pretty good.
yeah, I would say so too.
Forensic testing showed that the blood was type A, and there were no drugs or tobacco in this person's system. A blood-soaked bandage was found stuck to the back of a notebook in the living room, leading police to assume the killer injured his right hand and tried to dress his wound with the supplies found in the house's first aid kit. Due to the brutality of the crime, the abundant forensic evidence left behind, and the damage done within the home, police initially believed that multiple perpetrators were involved, but the footprints and the blood left behind belonged to a single individual. There was also evidence that the perpetrator spent some time in the house after the murders. Gibbs, he was thought to have taken a nap on the couch and eaten food and drank from the kitchen. He also used the toilet without flushing it.
Super comfortable.
First of all, that's just bad manners.
Well, that's true.
But also, it seems very brazen. I mean, you are leaving evidence
Yeah,
behind in that toilet bowl
you are.
that could possibly be used against you.
But how relaxed did this person have to be to say, you know what, I'm not worried about anybody coming over. I'm going to take me a little nap. Maybe I'll eat something, use the toilet, and then I'll get on out of here.
Well, and I think you have to analyze what that could potentially mean. Did this person know the family? Did they know that the extended family lived right next door,
Right.
could pop on over at any minute, or they didn't know that, so they weren't worried about a pop-in? According to ABC News Australia, based on Mikio's computer records, the killer used his computer to access the internet at 1:18 a.m. to try to buy tickets to an upcoming theatrical event using Mikio's bank cards.
Well, if he would have gotten the tickets, did he think that they would be able to track him down at the show?
Well, you talked about being relaxed. This person's eating, they're drinking. They might have taken an upper decker. And then all of a sudden, they're just going to get on the computer and see what type of show they want to go to.
Yeah.
It seems so very odd.
Maybe they wanted to scalp the tickets later.
Maybe. He also went to Mikio's and Yasuko's employers' websites. They figured out that the computer was accessed again at 10 a.m. on Sunday, which told investigators that the intruder remained in the house for about 10 hours after the murders until Yasuko's mother, Maruko, let herself in, which is when they believe he fled out of the second-story bathroom window.
Maybe that's why he didn't flush. Maybe it was in the bathroom.
Interrupted?
Yeah. Gotta go.
That could have been. Japan has always been a relatively law-abiding country. I think comparatively, it has little violent crime. The New York Times reported that with the Japanese housing bubble and resulting recession in the 1990s, unemployment soared, assets greatly decreased, illegal immigration increased, shifting away from some of the traditional values and eventually leading to higher crime rates. In 2000, the crime rate rose 12% from the previous year.
It's a big percentage.
Yeah, it's a big jump. And the Japanese police force was generally revered for its crime-solving abilities and was thought to be incorruptible. But in 2000 and 2001, the New York Times reported that multiple police scandals broke out across the country involving drug abuse, bribery, extortion, hazing of officers, and sexual assault. A New York Times opinion poll revealed that 60% of citizens said their trust in police was declining, and 45% in Japan said they didn't trust the police.
Man, those are not good numbers.
No, they're not. I think what the key is that it's a big swing from, however many years earlier where I think there was less crime. People put or had more trust in their police force. According to Japan Today, the Superintendent General of the Metropolitan Police Department, Takeshi Noda, attended the Miyazawa crime scene in person, which, according to the article, is basically unheard of. And he told his detectives this is an extremely brutal crime. Do whatever you can to arrest the culprit. Okay, not so sure we shouldn't be saying that at every crime.
Right.
Do whatever you can to arrest the culprit. I get it. Some crimes are more extreme, more brutal than others.
Still a nice little pep talk.
Yeah, he wants this solved. Detectives pieced together the family's last known movements using witness statements and technical data. The family went shopping in the afternoon at 2 different shopping centers and returned home around 7 p.m. Yasuko called her mother from the home phone. At 9:38 p.m., Nina's computer was used to watch a television program online. At 10:45, Mikio logged on to his computer to access his work emails. This was really the last known action of any of the family members, and it's thought that the murders occurred shortly after that. But it is interesting, Gibbs, when you talk about some of these more recent cases, what police have at their disposal.
Yeah.
In the form of technology. When they can tell that, a child in the house watched a movie at such and such time. The dad accessed his work emails. It does provide law enforcement with a lot more to go on.
More definitive timeline?
Sure. Than you would have in the years before the internet and cell phones and all of that. According to TokyoReporter.com, Mikio's employer was interviewed, and police learned that he wasn't working on anything particularly sensitive. So I think to them that ruled out the murders being work-related. This was also something that his diary and financial records supported. Family and friends were interviewed to see if the family had complained of any difficulties or problems in their personal or social life. Detectives were told that Mikio had recently confronted a group of kids at the skate park for being loud, and that he also had some strong words with some young members of a local motorcycle gang. This motorcycle gang was called Baso Zoku, and apparently they had been for some time causing a number of problems in the neighborhood.
Well, they had a reputation.
They did. For being violent and dangerous, they were also known to carry weapons with them. According to JapanToday.com, 5 days before the murders, Yasuko complained to her father that someone was repeatedly parking in front of their home, even though plenty of other parking was available.
That drives me crazy, by the way. I used to have this house that it didn't matter. Plenty of parking anywhere on the street, but they always wanted to park in front of my house.
And what did you do?
I can't say.
Oh, okay.
They might be listening.
They might.
They might know who did that one thing to their car.
And it might be held against you in a court of law.
Exactly.
We've had a few parking issues at my house over the years. It never was a problem until both of my daughters started driving.
Yeah.
Then it became an issue because they have to find a place to park, and the neighbors, some of them park in areas that I wish they wouldn't. I don't have any control over it.
Right. Well, I remember that one year you had me park really far away and you had to shuttle me in and back every time.
Yeah.
It was a little extreme.
It was.
You wouldn't let me park in your driveway.
2 days later, a witness reported seeing a man walking around the outside of the Miyazawa home, and the witness described this man as though he were studying the house. Okay, I could see where a person could get that vibe. Now, if you're just walking down the sidewalk and you look over,
yeah,
well, you're not studying my house. But if you're just standing out front and you're walking around the side and you're peering and you're doing some things like that, okay, I'm going to keep a close eye on you. I don't know if you're casing the joint. I don't know what you're doing.
But I don't like it.
I don't like it. Although there may not be much I can do about it legally. On December 29th, a young man wearing clothing similar to what was left behind at the Miyazawa house was observed at a railway station, which was the station next door to the shopping center where the family would go shopping the following day. So they're really getting some good information. Sounds like they are doing some pretty decent police work here. Also on December 30th, a sashimi knife was purchased at that shopping center, pretty much identical to the one used in the murders.
It's interesting. I don't know how often that knife is sold.
Yeah, probably a lot in Japan, but it does seem as though they're hearing about a lot of things happening in or around this shopping center that the family was known to be at prior to the murders. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. According to ABCNewsAustralia.com, on the day of the murders, December 30th, the same young man, dressed in identical clothing, was observed in a railway station just a mile from the Miyazawa's home. And locals reported that between June and December, cats roaming in the park began turning up dead. And not just dead, they had been mutilated. Some had their tails cut off. Some were even stripped of their skin.
Pretty sick.
Yeah, this is very sick stuff. So I think when police hear that, all right, they're all in. That's got to be something. But apparently the individual responsible for it was later identified, I'm sure punished in whatever fashion they were. But as it relates to this case, they were ruled out as having anything to do with the murders.
I keep my eyes on them.
Yeah, moving forward.
Sure.
It's not a good sign. We know that from, the many True Crime All the Time episodes we've done, the hurting of animals, the mutilation, animal cruelty in general. It's not a great sign. Detectives learned of 3 suspicious incidents on the night of the murders. A taxi driver picked up a fare at Setagaya Park at around midnight, and when the 3 men exited the taxi, the driver noticed several bloodstains in the cab that hadn't been there before. Ultimately, testing revealed the stains to be chocolate, not blood. So I don't know. Maybe a passenger has a Hershey bar, in their back pocket. They forgot about it. It's hot. You've got leather seats. Between the leather and your butt and your jeans, you're creating a little easy bake oven in there that just melts that chocolate. I don't know.
It sounds like you have experienced this.
Maybe. But you also have to think about this cab driver thinking, I need to call police. We need to get this tested.
I'm thinking like the character Bill Murray played in Caddyshack. He probably just would have walked up and ran his finger across it.
Well,
and
he would.
it and said, "Oh, that's his Hershey bar."
Like he ate the Baby Ruth in the pool.
Exactly.
So that was the first suspicious incident. The second was a young woman was driving by Setagaya Park when a young man jumped in front of her car, denting it. As he ran off, she saw blood on the back of his left hand. And why would that be suspicious? Because police believe that it's possible the killer cut their hand.
Well, he could have also cut his hand when he ran into the car. Never know.
Could have. The third incident occurred at a medical center outside a railway station just a few hundred yards north of the Miyazawa house. A young man sought treatment for a cut on his hand that was so deep that the bone was exposed. The staff treated the wound without asking how this man came by his injury, and he left without giving his name.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, people make mistakes, cutting things in the kitchen. They slice up their hand, their finger, sometimes deep, sometimes to the bone. But the timing and the location and the fact that, you had this family slaughtered, okay, it's going to make it more suspicious. It's going to make all of these things a little more suspicious, except for the chocolate.
Exactly.
According to JapanToday.com, the Metropolitan Police Force established a special task force to focus exclusively on the murders. We talked about there was a lot of evidence left behind by the killer. Some of that was genetic material. So you have to believe expectations were very high that, this crime was going to be solved. This killer was going to be identified. How could that not happen? We've got genetic material.
Right.
We're going to get DNA. We're going to solve this case. The killer also left plenty of fingerprints throughout the crime scene. And it was said that his thumbprint had this distinctive swirl with 2 lines through it, which some people compared to a drawing of a pig's nose.
I was checking out my thumbprint.
I know. I saw you looking at your thumbprint. I'm like, okay. I'm looking at mine now. I don't see a pig's nose in there. But maybe that's why they were saying it was so distinctive. The feces in the toilet was compared to the stomach contents of the 4 slain family members who had all eaten the same meals that day. It didn't match. And so it was believed to belong to the killer. And it was discovered that he had eaten green beans with sesame dressing, a common dish in Japan. Right. I do think I would have liked to have been some type of forensic technician. I don't really want to be the guy that has to go through the feces.
You don't want to be known as the feces person?
No, I don't want to figure out what people ate for dinner. I don't want to do that. Forensic examination of the footprints showed that the killer was wearing a slightly broken in size 14, which sounds big, but that's a 9 here in the United States, Slazenger brand basketball shoes, which they figured out were manufactured in South Korea between 1989 and 2000. And what I found interesting is that they figured out that more than 5,000 pairs were made and distributed in South Korea, but they were never sold in Japan.
So you either had to go over there to get them or have them shipped, or maybe someone brought them over to you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are options to get them, but this person did not go into a store in Japan and buy them off the shelf. His hat was known as a crusher style hat. I have one of these. I love this hat. Basically you can crush it, smash it down, which makes it easy to fit, in your pocket or in a backpack or something like that. And then when you pull it out, it just kind of returns to its original shape.
You are a hat guy.
I am a hat guy. You would be too if you had the amount of hair that I did. It was gray wool with a black band. And the label told investigators that it was only sold after September 1st, 1999. Now, I said I didn't want to be the feces guy. I would like to be the person that tracks all of this stuff. It's very, interesting to me. Where were these shoes sold? This hat was only made between this period of time and that period of time. I like that stuff.
Leave the feces behind.
Yeah, don't want that. The scarf left behind by the killer didn't have a label. It was made of cheap acrylic fabric. So police reached out to the public to help identify it. Many people reported that they received an identical scarf as a cheap promotional item. One said they received theirs from a school uniform supplier. Another person said they got theirs from a gas station. So probably not a whole lot of help there. The lightweight black jacket left behind was an AirTech brand, a popular jacket in Japan, which sold for about, $30 US. Over 82,000 were sold just in the 2 months leading up to the murders. So maybe popular is an understatement.
Right. Definitely going to be a challenge to narrow that list down.
Yeah. However, in the pockets of the jacket, detectives found bird droppings belonging to a sparrow. They found leaves from a willow tree, pollen from an ornamental Japanese pomegranate plant, and dirt from the Seoul region in South Korea.
So bizarre.
There's 4 bizarre things to have in the pocket of your jacket.
It's like you're going to make some type of potion.
The one thing that jumped out at me was South Korea. The shoes came from South Korea. We've got dirt now in the pocket that was determined to be from South Korea. The black leather gloves and the 2 black handkerchiefs were too common to be tracked down. And the gloves did kind of throw me a little bit. We've already said that this killer left behind a lot of fingerprints. So I think police kind of suspected that they were worn for warmth rather than to try to, avoid leaving evidence. One handkerchief had rolled edges, which indicated to police that the killer most likely wore it as a face mask, and the other had a slit cut into the center, likely they thought to hold the knife. And they based this on the fact that this was a method used by people who worked in fish processing plants. Basically, they wrap the handle that gives them a better grip while also helping to protect their hand.
Yeah, and keep their hand from slipping.
So, could that be some good evidence? Maybe. Maybe this is a person who then or at one point in the past worked at a fish processing plant. And we talked about the hip bag. I call it a fanny pack. Some people call it a sling blade. I call it a Kaiser blade. But this was also left behind by the killer. The strap had been adjusted to fit a waist measuring between 70 to 75 centimeters, which works out to, 27 to 29 inches.
It's a small waist.
That's a small waist.
For a man. Or anybody, really.
No, for a man, absolutely. I think in high school, if I remember correctly, I was about a 32.
Okay.
I'm nowhere near that anymore, unfortunately. Inside the bag, investigators found stains made by fluorescent red dye, identical to another stain found in the Miyazawa garage. But since the garage was locked on the night of the murder, detectives theorized that the killer may have been inside the garage and or the house before the murders. But that later turned out to be a moot point because it was determined that a highlighter marker made the stain inside the bag.
I'm sure that was a little deflating for the investigators.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know all the ins and outs of the investigation, but you'd have to say, from what we do know, from what we've talked about, man, they are running down everything they can. According to TokyoReporter.com, forensic investigators also found some sand in the bag. And it was said that they analyzed each grain. Okay, I'm out on that one too. I don't want to be the grain analyzer. It was determined that some were from Japanese beaches, but a few were from the Las Vegas area. and some were even traced to the Mojave Desert region of Southwest California near the Edwards Air Force Base. So now we're getting into a very interesting rabbit hole, you would have to say. Vegas. We know there's a lot of Air Force bases in and around Vegas.
Sure.
Edwards Air Force Base, a big one. There's a lot of Air Force bases in California as well. A few of the particles were tiny glass spheres used in powder by skateboarders to prevent their feet from slipping off the board. So police had to make that connection. The Miyazawas are having issues with the skateboarders in the park. These particles are found in this bag. They're determined to be used to get a better grip on skateboards.
So was the powder shipped in from a skating place over in the States? Did someone bring it over with them? How did that sand come from the States?
Oh, you're thinking maybe the sand was shipped when somebody bought the whatever it was that gave them the better grip.
Right.
Okay. I didn't even think about that. Now, if the sand came from one area, just Las Vegas or just California, okay, maybe that would be a little bit easier, but we know packages get shipped all over the place. Who knows? Oils and compounds lifted from the bag and handkerchiefs were analyzed by forensic experts and found to be remnants of perfume or cologne. And when they broke it down further and analyzed it, it was determined that the killer wore Drakkar Noir cologne.
Do you wear that?
I wore it in high school. Probably too much of it, if you asked some of my girlfriends back in the day.
Yeah.
It was kind of the go-to when I was in high school. A lot of my buddies wore Drakkar.
You guys just all went out and got the big bottle of it and shared it.
Yeah, it was just a big wave of Drakkar walking down through the mall. So based on the clothing and the forensic evidence, police theorized the killer that they were looking for was somewhere between 15 and 30 years of age, was 5 foot 6 inches tall, had a slim build, and had brown eyes and brown hair. Okay, some of that stuff I get. The height is very specific.
Sure is.
The age range is kind of wide, but I get that. The slim build, I understand. If you got a 27 waist size as a man, you got a slim build.
Yeah, you're definitely slim. Not a tall guy.
No, 5'6", not tall. But again, if the killer's 15 years old, could still be growing. They knew that the killer had to be agile enough to exit the house by the second floor bathroom window. They thought he either lived alone or with relatives who wouldn't be suspicious if he stayed out all night. They also thought he had money troubles because it seemed as though the crimes, at least initially, may have been financially motivated. And Gibbs, detectives had to zero in on the idea that the killer may have been a skateboarder, maybe one that Mikio confronted a few days before the murders. We talked about the gripping compound found in the bag. It was also said that Drakkar was popular with professional skaters throughout the 1980s. Raglan sweaters and hip bags were also said to be common items with skateboarders.
Well, if your idol wore this cologne, maybe you wanted to wear it too someday.
Yeah, I kind of didn't understand that at first, right? Popular in the 1980s. Well, what does that have to do with, the time period that we're talking about here? But I see where you're coming from. Growing up, if I idolized Michael Jordan and I knew that he wore Drakkar, would I then later on think I should wear Drakkar too?
You probably would have.
Maybe.
I know you did.
I already wore it, so didn't matter.
I know back in the day you idolized some cowboy, so you started wearing Stetson.
Is that the same as Stetson?
Yes.
Or is that the one that you bought at Kmart?
That's the off-brand.
That was supposed to be Stetson,
Yeah.
but actually wasn't.
Saved a little bit of money.
So we have talked about quite a bit of evidence. Now, I wouldn't call it all concrete evidence, but there's a lot, right, that police were working with. With all of that, again, it was expected that the killer would be identified quickly, caught fairly quickly, but weeks passed with no news about any arrests. Neighbors, friends, and family members were questioned to see if they had recently traveled to the Southwest U.S. or a very specific beach in Japan. None of them had. It was said that from January to May 2001, 150 officers worked exclusively on the Miyazawa murder case, and many others contributed some type of effort to the investigation. 2,700 leads and tips were tracked down, but they just couldn't catch a break. Right? They couldn't find that big tip or clue or, whatever they needed to point them in the right direction. So that the authorities were frustrated, probably asking themselves, was this killer incredibly smart or just incredibly lucky? But either way, months turned into years, and investigators were no closer to solving it. In 2006, DNA technology advanced to the point that anthropological profiling was available, and they tested the blood from the sweatshirt. No match to any known individual was made, but the sample did provide a racial profile of the killer. It revealed that the killer's father had a 1 in 13 chance of being Japanese, a 1 in 10 chance of being Chinese, and a 1 in 3 chance of being Korean.
Not too surprised by the Korean part, knowing that we have the South Korea shoes and the South Korea dirt. So, I can see the Korean part fitting in.
Now, mitochondrial DNA from his mother indicated Mediterranean, Adriatic, South European roots. So, obviously technology had advanced by 2006, but it still wasn't conclusive. When you're talking about a 1 in 13 chance, a 1 in 10 chance, a 1 in 3 chance, okay, obviously that's better than nothing.
Sure.
But you're not really nailing it down.
No, that's like me going to the racetracks.
Multiple racetracks. Also by 2006, it was said 147,000 police officers had been involved with the case in some capacity. That is a huge number.
It is. That's a lot of individuals.
98 individuals were still being investigated for possible involvement in the crime. One investigator was convinced that the killer had a particular fixation on Nina, given the extent of her injuries. One young man had shown interest in the 8-year-old at her ballet and piano lessons, and it was said that he would follow her movements during her time there. His DNA profile also matched, as he had a Japanese father and a Southern European mother. The detective interviewed this young man and even searched his home, but found out that his fingerprints were not a match. Also in 2006, freelance journalist Tora Saito wrote a book about the case titled The Setagaya Family Murders, Confessions of Intruders, in which she claims to have solved the case and identified the killer. The book drew a lot of criticism from family members and also police due to what they called its many glaring inconsistencies and errors, with many quotes being attributed to vague family members.
So now we know why the family wasn't happy.
Well, right. If you can't find anybody in the family that says, oh yeah, I spoke with the author and I told them that, yeah, maybe you get a little dubious. According to ABCNewsAustralia.com, that same year, the Japanese government announced a 3 million yen reward for information leading to the killer's identity.
Sounds like a lot of money.
So normally we do conversions from US to US from year to year. I'm going to ask you to try to guesstimate how much US 3 million yen would be.
I'm going to say $23,990.
I have no idea, but that's could be close. It could not be close. But you didn't wait for me to do the beep, 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 beep.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm doing it after. The following year, the government asked the United States, China, and some other Western countries for access to their fingerprint databases to compare those collected from the crime scene. But it's unclear what, if any, progress was made. But I could see, Gibbs, why they would want Western databases.
Sure.
Especially the U.S. databases. I mean, you've got California, Nevada type leads.
Yeah.
The mom is thought to be European. Okay. So you want some of the databases over there as well.
Look, it can't hurt to run it through every system you can get your hands on.
No, absolutely. Can't hurt at all. Now, at that time, Japan had a 15-year statute of limitations on murder due to the potential for evidence to be lost or broken down and the fact that witness memories tend to fade. In 2009, the statute of limitations was increased to 25 years. But it didn't apply to the Miyazawa murders because it wasn't made retroactive. So if the killer wasn't caught and prosecuted by 2015, he never could be. Now, obviously, that's a significant difference than what we have here in the U.S. There is no statute of limitations on murder over here. So, that's why, people are prosecuted 40, 50, sometimes even 60 years later.
Especially with the advancements in DNA.
Yeah, that, and then the forensic genealogy route that, is solving a lot of crimes. In an interview with ABC News Australia in February 2009, Mikio's father and Yasuko's sister, along with 15 other families who suffered similar tragedies, established a group called Asura no Ki, which translates to infinite time, referring to the unending grief that survivors go through. They called on the government to abolish the statute of limitations on murder crimes with a statement on the group's website reading, "The feelings of our bereaved have never faded in 15 or 25 years.
Such a true statement.
Yeah, it's a very true statement. I get it. Statutes of limitations have been, around for a long time. They've changed. Even here in the U.S., different crimes and the statute of limitations has changed over the years. But the one thing that has never changed is that the family of a murder victim, their grief doesn't end after X number of years. You can't put an expiration date on it.
Right.
And that yearning to want to figure out who did it and to want to have that person pay for it, that's not going to end either.
No, it's always going to be there.
The group tried to persuade government officials by pointing out that advances in forensics didn't mean that evidence dissipated over time, and it had become easier to prove cases in court even after many years. The group got the support of the National Victims Association, and public support for it began to swell also. Their efforts paid off, and in April 2012, Japan abolished all statute of limitations on murder, including any crimes where the statute of limitations had not yet expired. And this was a big deal for the extended family. That meant that even after that 2015 date, their killer could still face justice.
Yeah, they can keep searching.
In late December 2014, on the anniversary of the murders, the reward was increased to 20 million yen.
And it's getting up there.
That's a big increase. That same month, a Japanese television network aired a program about the murders where a reporter and a member of the FBI used behavioral clues to craft a profile of the killer. They determined that the killer was an acquaintance who held a grudge against the family and implied that Yasuko's sister Anne supported their opinion. But after the program aired, Anne said the TV production company used editing to give the impression that she agreed when she really didn't. She filed suit against the company and she won. Since the start of the investigation, Mikio's computer activity led investigators to believe that the killer remained in the house until 10 a.m. But in 2005, they revised that opinion as they thought the computer was activated around that time by the mouse being knocked to the floor. Yasuko's mother said it was possible that she had done it as she moved through the house, but she didn't remember if it happened or not. On the 15th anniversary of the murders, police held a candlelight vigil. By this time, over 250,000 police officers had worked on the case, and they had received over 12,000 pieces of information relating to the murders. New information continued to come in, and in 2015 alone, they received over 2,000 tips. So they're still working the case. It seems as though they're still putting a lot of resources towards solving it.
Yeah, they want to find this killer.
In 2015, a journalist under an anonymous pen name published a book titled The Setagaya Family Murders 15 Years On. The author claims to have spent years researching the case and that he had identified the killer. He claimed that the killer was a South Korean soldier who had turned killer for hire under the pseudonym Lee Einan. This guy took lessons in weapons training at a school for mercenaries run by a man who ran a religious cult. It was said that this cult leader had lost a lot of money in real estate ventures by buying houses and then selling the land to developers. The cult leader supposedly approached Mikio about selling their home to him instead of taking the government compensation, but Mikio refused him. So the cult leader hired this Lee guy to intimidate the family into accepting the deal, except he exceeded what he was hired for and instead brutally murdered the family to steal their compensation money. The author claims he secretly got Lee's fingerprints and compared them to those found at the crime scene, and he said they were a match. So there's a lot here.
Sure.
Right, put out in this book. I think what tells me a lot is that the police response to this book was basically they laughed at it. You know, they called it preposterous and said that if any of this was true, the killer would have been caught years ago. As of 2019, 35 members of the Metropolitan Police Force were assigned exclusively to the case. But as of today, the case remains unsolved. The killer is still at large. I will say, 35 members on what you would normally deem to be a cold case. It might be open, it might be active, but many, many years have gone by. That's a pretty large number.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're talking about one detective who, opens the case every now and then, follows up on leads. To have 35 individuals currently working it, it's a lot.
It shows that they are making efforts.
They're dedicated
Sure are.
to solving it. The murders of Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei remain one of Japan's longest running and mysterious cases. Flyers still line the streets of Setagaya, appealing for information. The 20 million yen reward is still available, making it the highest cash reward in all of Japan.
Well, that just shows you how big of a case this is in Japan.
Yeah, all of it. The number of people still working it, the highest cash reward. The police superintendent, Takeshi Noda, is retired, but still works on the case. He told Australian journalists with ABC News the following in 2019. When I think about the feelings of the victims' families who lost their loved ones so many years ago, I just couldn't pass on this case to my successors. When I think about the brutality of how he murdered the four, I just wonder, how could a sane person carry out such an extreme crime? The new superintendent was also interviewed by journalists with ABC News. He expressed his dedication to solving the murder, saying, "It's our mission to capture the killer who murdered 4 innocent people, including 2 young children, and make him atone for his crime. It's an atrocious case, rarely seen in Japan's history, and we think solving this case will prevent similar crimes from happening in the future." And I think we have seen this before, Gibbs, where, somebody retires, but they've worked on a case for so long that even in retirement, they just can't give it up.
No, they probably can't sleep at night. They're constantly thinking about it, and they just want to try to get it solved. I think you have that personality too.
Well, I think a lot of people would see it as unfinished business.
Right.
You know, how can I feel good about my X number of years with the Force when we couldn't figure this one out?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying it's wrong.
No.
I'm just saying I do think there are some people who would carry that. And we've seen it in a number of cases here in the U.S. as well. You know, I don't know what it would be like to work on one case in some instances for 20, 25 years, and then to have to retire and just say, yeah, I couldn't get it done. I'm just walking away.
I think it'd be tough, because I think it becomes part of you.
Yeah.
Kind of haunts you.
Sure.
And I think you want to be able to try to get it resolved.
Yusuko's sister Anne has said that her biggest regret is not being able to see little Ray and Nina grow up. And I think that's pretty universal.
Sure.
I don't care what country you're in. When you're a family member of a victim, a murder victim, and especially when young children are murdered, there's always going to be that. You know, they're frozen in time. You know, at the time that they were murdered, that thought, that wonder of what would they look like now? What would they have gone on to do? Who would they have married? What occupation would they have chosen? That's kind of heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah.
It really is.
Sure is.
But that's it, Gibbs, for our episode on the unsolved Miyazawa family murders. I do find it extremely interesting. You know, it seems as though, unlike a lot of unsolved cases, this is a case where there's quite a bit of evidence, including genetic material that has provided, DNA. It just goes to show you that even though technology has advanced to an amazing point, it can't solve every case.
Right.
We talk about the fact that, okay, you're not in a database, no match. Maybe they will try some of the genetic genealogy, maybe they'll go that route and be able to, to figure out something that way. But I don't know. It doesn't sound like they're going to give up on it. And it also sounds like this is a case that people in Japan really want to see closed.
Yeah.
They want this person to have to pay whatever price is deemed appropriate for what they did. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yes, hear 'em.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Terry from Missouri. I just discovered your podcast a couple months ago, and so it's the first time I'm calling in, but I just wanted to give you an idea. I had an ex that lived kind of in Brownsville, and Matamoros is where he was from, and his father owned a newspaper in Matamoros and was killed. He was killed along with a reporter in front of his newspaper, and it was kind of said to be sort of a hit because he kept publishing things about like the cartel and things like that. That would be a good one for Unsolved. Anyways, I love you guys. I'm loving this podcast. It's the best. And I am definitely just Team Mike. I just love you both. So keep your head on a swivel. Bye.
Well, we definitely appreciate the voicemail, and we'll look into that case.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Hi, this is David from Rhode Island. I've called before. I've been a listener since year one. I was calling because I just listened to your episode on the Solder children, and you guys were talking about how they felt the bodies were cremated in the fire, and it lasted like 45 minutes and whatnot. So I'm a teacher. My part-time job is at a crematory, and I can tell you that there's no way that you can cremate those bodies in a house fire in 45 minutes and have nothing left. I've cremated anybody, from kids, unfortunately, all the way to people in their hundreds, and the quickest anything cremates is probably about 60 to 75 minutes. And even if something was completely cremated, there's lots of bones that are very distinguishable left behind. So that's complete malarkey, I would say. Just wanted to let you guys know that if you ever have questions about crematory funeral stuff, my wife's in the business, and that's kind of how I got into it. But I'm very well versed in that area. All right, have a good day.
And that's why probably many people think that the kids were kidnapped and taken away from the home versus being burned up in the fire.
Yeah, and I thought we expressed that. Maybe I don't remember exactly, but I thought we were very skeptical that in that amount of time the bodies could have been cremated. Now I know people said that they thought that, but I didn't think we said we thought that.
Hey boys, I was just listening to the latest podcast. And you said that Gibby was on the cover of Playgirl. So I'm just wondering, is there a way for us, the listeners, to get a hold of a copy of that? Do you still have all those copies you had sent to your house? Just wondering. Love you, boys. Bye.
Oh, Gibbs, I know a lot of people would like to get their hands on those. Unfortunately, I did have a bunch because you had them sent to my house. An unnamed 3-letter government agency actually showed up one day, confiscated them all. And so my assumption is they're being held, somewhere with the Roswell crash stuff, everything that the government doesn't want us or doesn't feel as though we're ready to know about or see. I think they're including those copies with that stuff.
I don't doubt that.
No. But I think they would be worth a fortune. If I could get them back, I'd throw them on, eBay or whatever site would allow me to do that.
Make a little bit of cash.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd probably have my retirement set. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All this month, stream the funniest films for free on Pluto TV. Watch comedy classics like Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and Mean Girls. Or drop in for a Tyler Perry marathon with a Medea family funeral and Medea's witness protection. Pluto TV also has hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows like Get Shorty, Be Cool, Key and Peele, Comedy in Color, and more. And no contracts, no subscriptions, no fees, no joke. So download the Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start laughing today. Pluto TV, drop in, watch free.